Liam, thanks for your time. I appreciate that. Probably just dive in, maybe coming off the back of Saturday, sort of fitness update really. Mankell Forson, if I just ask you what the latest is with him.
Yeah, he did pick up a hamstring injury. We're not sure on the extent of it. He's been scanned this afternoon, so unfortunately, yeah, he's picked up a hamstring injury.
And obviously you need to await the result of the scan, but clarify clearly not in your thoughts for tomorrow.
No, he won't be available tomorrow, no.
Coming out of that game, any other issues fitness-wise with the lads who were on duty Saturday?
No, a couple of bumps and bruises as to be expected. The same after most games. So no, nothing major to report after Saturday from that perspective.
Just before we get into obviously what we're here today for Portsmouth, but just your more considered thoughts. Now you've had a couple of days to process that Millwall game. You said frustration was one of your overriding emotions, and you'd probably feel that when you debriefed it. Was that still the case?
Yeah, it would be because of the result and the manner of the result. It definitely feels like we kind of lost it rather than they won it, I think, in terms of the manner of the second goal. And then also just we got drawn into their game second half. I watched it back at the weekend and probably similar feelings, I think, in terms of the first 25-30 minutes, exactly where I want to get us to, but dominating in their half of the pitch for longer periods, and there's still so much work to do, but the turning that domination into more chances will be the next bit. And then second half we came out and said to the lads at half time, expect them to come out and look different. I think it's quite often the case if you have elements of control like we did. Naturally Alex comes in, solves the problem for them and says, right, be a bit more aggressive, press like this, change this. And what we then have to do is be good enough to adapt and solve the problem off the back of that. And for me, we didn't do that. We made it their game a bit too much second half.
Yeah, you said that after the game Saturday, second half nowhere near the level. And do you attribute that drop-off partly to obviously they were a bit more aggressive, but maybe not handling the pressure, taking that responsibility?
Elements of probably all of it. I think one, recognising, and naturally, I think how we work with the lads, we're working real hard to get the players to make smart decisions, which byproduct of that is it probably puts a bit of responsibility on them in terms of. Rather than we're telling you have to play short, we're telling you have to play long, we're saying make the right decision at the right time, which they're going to get wrong. And I think in when you do that and you throw a load of pressure in the mix and you put 3 points on the line and you've got debuts and people desperate to do well, etc., I think it then leads to a bit. I think of what we saw second half was a little bit disjointed, a little bit in terms of. Foggy brains in problem solving, and we got caught playing their game a little bit. And despite that, there was still a couple of moments. Matias had a terrific chance, Ante had a good one off the cross. There was still a couple of flashes and moments within it, which for all the play between the boxes, it wasn't like we've had to suck up loads of shots on goal, etc. It was more a fact we didn't control the game like we wanted to second half.
When you say you've obviously watched the back, I'm sure you had those dialogues with your coaching staff. But how does it look with your players? What type of coach are you? Do you want that input from the players day one, day two after a game?
Yeah, definitely. Spoke with a few individually today. But then we had a team meeting. We're real honest, open. I think if we want to improve, if we want to get better, and we want to do it quickly, we've got to be real open and honest. And again, I think that for me is the only way you learn and improve and get better is if you can take that. And it comes from putting the team first place. Is if we want the team to be successful, we have to look at ourselves and go, right, this wasn't good enough, this was good. And I think getting the right ratio of that, of showing what's good and what it looks like versus areas to improve, what needs to be better. Yeah, of course, my job's to find the right blend and balance of that. We had a real open, honest, frank meeting this morning with the lads, and then went out on the grass and worked on some bits.
Well, you said immediately after the game that one of the first things you'd convey to them is that you felt they'd stop doing the basics. I mean, just for some of the outside, the uninitiated, I mean, what does that translate into? What are the basics for you?
Yeah, numerous things. Probably could give you a long list. I think when it duels with and without the ball, I think a real simple thing. Simple things: receiving, short passing, processing in the right order, so you're proactive with your thinking, you're not getting it and then looking, which you get, especially when a team that jumps and presses, you've got to think quicker and then be able to execute that, a simple touch, doing it in 2 rather than 3. The speed the guys move at, if you take that extra touch, spaces close down quite quickly. You're talking a couple of metres difference in position of the opposition. So for me, they're the little bits. I think body shape. There's so many little things that underpin for me, the foundations of a performance before we even talk about tactics. If you don't got those little basics right, them little things lead to slightly bigger problems.
And is that just you talked about process, trying to short circuit, but is that specifically that base? Is that just work on the pitch, just the players understanding what you're wanting from them, and just repetitive, almost practice?
Definitely that, what we're after, but also their connections, their understanding of each other. Like I say, it's the first time that team's played together at the weekend. There's obviously been little relationships, developing, forming, but not under pressure. I think that's the biggest bit in terms of what we use the weekend for, because let's be clear, we'll win games, we'll lose games, we'll draw games over the course of the season. I think is how do we do it together? So when we're up against it, how do we respond? What are the strategies? How do we use previous experience in the future to go, actually, I remember that, let's do this slightly different. So for me, that they're all the bits that we have to use and maximise the learning from, so that we keep growing, that we keep improving.
You touched on a little bit earlier there, just about maybe the amount of chances. You didn't maybe work the keeper enough. I mean, that's again, is that just working on those connections and what you're asking players to do in those more advanced areas of the pitch?
Yeah, I think so. I think actually look. Ultimately, the most important stat's the number of goals, right? But then when you drill below that a little bit, Flad had 1 save to make. Their keeper had 2. I think when corners, etc. There wasn't a huge amount in it. I thought they got into our box a bit more, which we defended terrifically well. Strangely, it's one of the first times I probably played Millwall and felt relatively comfortable defending set pieces. I thought we were excellent at it. But definitely when you look at the first half, the control we had, we have to turn that into better chances, better progression, final third, box entries. How do we do that to create more? And that's the hardest bit, right? We did a really good job, I thought, of pushing them back into a block. The next bit then, which is how do you then break that block down? How do you do it? And we did it a few times. We got into some half decent areas. I thought, second half, Jack, Joe down the right hand side, we got into some decent areas for a couple of crosses there. I know Ben Cresceni had one on the back post. So there was some decent moments and opportunities, which a lot of the work we'll do is to how do we now turn that control into better chances ultimately.
On that front, and you touched on him already, Matias Kvistgaard, to get him on the park, and it felt like that was his game. He wanted to be in the box. There was that one he went near post, went there for Josh Sargent's cross. That's his natural instinct. How did you see his initial impact, and where do you see him maybe moving forward? Is he more effective in that pocket behind a Sargent type player for you?
I'm really pleased with the impact he had. I think in terms of brought real energy, real purpose with his running. Obviously, had a terrific chance. It's one of those. I think what we have to do is get him in a position to bring his strengths. So when you look at it, that it's his movement, it's running depth, it's attacking crosses. So we have to get him in areas to do that, whether it be as the 9 or whether it be from slightly deeper. For me, it's getting him into an area, and they're the bits when you look at connections. Players understanding Matias, what is he? How does he play? What's his second, third game that he's played? How do we utilise him when we put the ball wide? What does he do? And they're the bits that, again, I think the players, will give them clarity around elements of it, but they'll also feel it as they develop their relationships as well.
And maybe tipping it forward to tomorrow night. Is he now at a level fitness-wise and that base that he could potentially start? Not that I'm pushing you for your team tomorrow night, but is he now at that level that he could start a game?
He's definitely pushing for it, yeah. I think he's definitely pushing. The minutes at the weekend were, doing the world of good in getting that in his legs, and playing at Carrow Road as well, I think could be another big positive for him. So he's moving in the right direction. We just have to make sure that we keep him going that way. Obviously, and that's, you look at the weekend, Mirko had only had 5 days with us. You look at Jeff, catching up a little bit in terms of it. Matias again, obviously because of the summer he had. So there's a few of the lads that are kind of progressing in that area, and I think one of the big pluses so far is we've been able to do a lot of the work early. Whereas there'll be some clubs that will still be doing a decent amount of business in the next few weeks, which any team that signs a decent number of players, it takes time to settle them, transition them, and get them into a position where they understand what it looks like.
Cup game tomorrow night. Are you a coach who would tip more towards maybe changing up wholesale, or do you want that continuity factor? Where do you set the balance when you especially early season, you're switching from league to cup?
Blend. I think it's a blend. I think it's one of those we want to give opportunity to people that haven't had minutes and keep progressing those, and you see at the weekend the importance of subs, the impact they can have. So I think we need to keep building that in players, as well as trying to find a bit of continuity and consistency, and trying to develop those relationships that we're speaking about. So it'll be one of those. It'll be a blend of bit of continuity, but also a little bit of change as well.
Where are you just more generally as a head coach? We've got competitions. Is it it's another opportunity to win a game, build some momentum, or is it one of those? Well, clearly the league is the priority, and maybe Pompey is the game you're looking at this coming week.
I'll be doing everything to win tomorrow night, and I think that's the key to it. Across the course of the season, you're going to have to make changes to the lineup in game and game to game, and I think that's why it's quite important for me. I think just because we make changes doesn't mean we're not trying to win the game. I think you see it, you pick up an injury, another player comes in, they've got to be ready to deliver to try and help us win. So for me, just because we make a few changes doesn't mean that we'd be belittling the game or devaluing the starting lineup. For me, I'll be picking a team and doing everything I can to try and win the game tomorrow night, and then after that we'll then obviously move on to Saturday.
Well, you were very candid when I asked you about your second why he just competition wise, and he just hadn't done enough to get himself into the 20. But for players like him, maybe Liam Gibbs, who was on the bench, if they do get some game time tomorrow, this is a perfect opportunity just to give you a nudge in a positive fashion.
That's the most important bit, I think. I think, when you look at depth, competition, how we use it all comes down to the players grabbing the opportunity. I mean, ultimately, I'll do everything I can to try and pick a team to win. And I think the challenge for the lads is to give me that headache and say, right, I'm the one that should be picked to do that. And the only way you do that is by controlling what they can, which is how they apply themselves every day, what their attitudes are like, and ultimately what quality they bring as well.
I know it's about you and what your team produce tomorrow night, but Watford, in many ways, a lot of parallels, new boss, new players. Obviously, not to remind you, but obviously got beat late on Saturday as well in that respect. But probably a club championship-wise who've been in the Premier League, similar ambitions. Can you see there's a lot of parallels between these two clubs?
Yeah, bits of a look. To be honest, I've just looked into their games and what their setup's like. I think the context of their situation and the changes they've made, etc. For me, I haven't invested too much time and energy. It's more about what players do they go, what team are they picking, what did they do at the weekend, and looking into that and taking the information we need as opposed to club comparison.
What do you think you'll need to be good at then tomorrow night, purely in terms of the challenge on the pitch?
Everything.
Simple, yeah.
Everything. I think you have to be hard to beat, and you can do that in numerous ways. You can do it without the ball, but you can also do it with the ball. So I think the big bit for me tomorrow is building on some of the bits that we've seen the other day, and we've got to keep progressing that and moving that forward. How do we control games with the ball, and then when we haven't got it, how do we, I thought we blocked really well at times at the weekend, but how do we then shift that block to moving up the pitch and being, a bit more aggressive so we don't stay in, defending our box. We don't want to be that type of team. So I thought the lads showed a terrific example of being able to do it. It's then how do you then progress it and move it up the pitch so that you force it back. So for me, it's that. We try to cover as many aspects so the lads have got clarity of how do you stay aligned, and then we just have to keep refining it and building on it and developing them at it.
I mean, you've said a few times in various sort of media sort of touch points, it is a process, but you need to accelerate that process and almost try and fast track it a bit. I mean, what does that look like, do you think, in your mind? How do you almost inject that, go forward a little bit quicker?
Yeah, I think it's the collective buy-in. I think it's us setting the culture, which I think we've worked hard to do. Is first and foremost, it's great me wanting to coach, but if the lads are closed and aren't open to it, that limits how quickly we can do it. So again, I think credit to the players. We had a tough meeting. We watched some tough clips this morning, but with the angle of none of it's ever a personal attack. It's how do we make you better? How do we make the team better? So I think being open to that. I think it's then going through some of the experiences. I think you have to. You don't just sign a load of players and all of a sudden, of course, I get the excitement. I'm excited still. It doesn't always just click straight away and everything's rosy. I think you have to learn, grow, and develop as a group and understand each other's games and what we're doing. And tomorrow night presents another opportunity for us to keep moving forward.
Just a couple more if I can, on the sort of transfer window side. You touched on it there that maybe you are at an advantage as a club that you've done a good proportion of your business, and that allows you then an opportunity to get those players in and work with them and try and again fast track that process. 2 or 3 weeks left in the window. I mean, is it more about trimming, do you feel now, in terms of the squad numbers than maybe further additions?
Yeah, probably. I think so. I think in terms of refining it a little bit, I think we'll be quite key. But even then, there's always noise, there's always uncertainties. So again, I think it's one of those. We can do some work and the noise won't go away. It will stay out there. So I think we'll probably continually have these chats up until the window shuts. So for me, it will be a case of concentrating on what we can, which is the controllables of making sure we train right, making sure everybody's buying into what we're doing, and then addressing situations when they arise. Yeah, and that's my final point, because when it was put to you directly about Sargent, you said, well, of course we know there has been interest, there probably will still be interest. You have to do your due diligence for every eventuality, and for him that applies to any player in the squad. Yeah, completely. And look, Ben and Lee are doing a terrific job behind the scenes in terms of not just for, as you mentioned there, Sarge, but for the whole squad, for not just this window but for many windows beyond. And I think that's where the game's probably really evolved and progressed, I think, in terms of the forward planning and being ready for every eventuality. And then of course there's always elements where you can be proactive, and there's bits where you have to be reactive as well. So it's the two going hand in hand. So there's a huge amount of work that goes on behind the scenes.
Good luck.
Thank you, appreciate that.